The monitoring station on Luna hummed quietly in the darkness of space. Officer Park Ji-min sat at her console, watching the endless stream of radio signals that came from across the galaxy. Most were normal traffic between trading ships and colonies. Some were news broadcasts from distant worlds. A few were scientific data from exploration missions, but tonight something different caught her attention. "Captain Kim," she called across the control room, "you need to hear this." Captain Kim Tae-ho walked over to her station. He was a tall man with tired eyes, someone who had spent too many years watching the empty spaces between stars. "What is it, Park?" "Distress signal from the Vegan system," she replied, adjusting her headphones. "It's in the Zephyrian language, but the computer is translating it." Kim leaned over to listen. The voice coming through the speakers was high and musical, but filled with desperate fear. "This is Scholar Prime Velnara of the Zephyrian Science Council," the translation said. "Our world is under attack. Orbital bombardment has begun. Our cities are burning. We have no military defense. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate help. They are killing civilians. Children are dying. We don't know why this is happening." The message repeated several times before cutting to static. Kim felt his stomach tighten. The Zephyrians were peaceful scientists and artists. They had never hurt anyone. Their only crime was being defenseless. "How far is the Vegan system?" Kim asked. 14 hours by hyperspace, Park replied. "Sir, there's more. I'm picking up additional signals from that direction. They're getting weaker." Kim understood what that meant. Fewer people left alive to send them. "Contact Admiral Choi immediately," Kim ordered. "Priority communication." Within minutes, Admiral Choi Min-ho appeared on the main screen from Earth's orbital command station. He was an older man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes, someone who had lived through Earth's first contact with alien species. "Report, Captain," Admiral Choi said. Kim quickly explained the distress signals. As he spoke, he could see the Admiral's expression growing darker. "What's the Galactic Council's response?" Choi asked. "We sent the signal to them 4 hours ago," Kim replied. "No response yet," Admiral Choi sighed. They both knew how the council worked. Committee meetings would be called. Territorial disputes would be argued. Environmental impact studies would be requested. By the time they approved any action, there might be no one left to save. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Lee So-young spoke up from the tactical station. "Earth could respond independently. We have 3 ships ready for immediate deployment." It was a dangerous suggestion. The Galactic Council didn't like member species acting without permission. They preferred diplomatic solutions to military ones. But diplomacy took time, and time was something the Zephyrians didn't have. Admiral Choi stared at the star charts for a long moment. Somewhere out there, children were dying while politicians debated proper procedures. "Captain Kim, prepare the Incheon for immediate departure," he finally said. "Contact Captains Lee and Jang. Tell them to ready the Seoul and Busan as well." "Sir, what about council authorization?" Kim asked. "We'll ask for forgiveness later," Admiral Choi replied grimly. "Right now people are dying and we're the only ones close enough to help them." Kim nodded. It was the right decision, even if it might cause political problems later. "What are our orders, Admiral?" "Get to the Vegan system as fast as possible. Evacuate as many civilians as you can. If you encounter hostile forces, you are authorized to use whatever force necessary to protect innocent lives." "Understood." "Sir, and Captain," Admiral Choi added, his voice growing serious, "be careful. We don't know who's attacking the Zephyrians or why. This could be pirates, but it might be something worse." The 3 Earth ships launched within 2 hours. The Incheon was the largest, a heavy cruiser designed for long-range missions. The Seoul was smaller but heavily armed, built for combat operations. The Busan was the smallest of the 3, specialized in electronic warfare and intelligence gathering. As they entered hyperspace, Captain Kim stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the swirling colors outside the view screen. His crew worked quietly around him, checking systems and preparing for whatever they might find. "How long since the last signal from the Zephyrians?" Kim asked. 3 hours, sir," Park replied from her communication station. The transmission stopped completely after that. Kim felt a chill. Complete silence usually meant one of 2 things. Either the attackers had jammed all communications or there was no one left alive to send signals. "Push the engines harder," he ordered. "I want to cut an hour off our travel time." Sir, that will stress the power systems, warned Chief Engineer Kang Woo-jin. Then stress them, Kim replied. Better to arrive with damaged engines than to arrive too late. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Yang Da-eun was preparing for mass casualties. She had never treated Zephyrian patients before, but she studied their biology files while organizing medical supplies. Doctor, do we know anything about their attackers? Asked her assistant nurse Yoon Hana. Nothing confirmed, Yang replied while checking her equipment. But whoever they are, they're targeting civilians. That tells us something about their character. Down in the Marine quarters, Commander Park Seol-ji briefed her soldiers on the mission. 50 Marines sat in neat rows, their armor cleaned and weapons ready. We're going in for a rescue operation, Park explained. That means protecting people, not hunting enemies. Your job is to get innocent civilians to safety. Sergeant Oh Dobbin raised her hand. Ma'am, what if the attackers try to stop us? Park's expression hardened. Then we remind them why Earth is called a death world. The Marines nodded. They all knew Earth's reputation among alien species. Most civilized worlds were peaceful places where dangerous weather was rare, and deadly animals were extinct. Earth was different. Hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and predators had shaped human evolution for millions of years. Other species thought of humans as survivors from a world that tried to kill them every day. It made humans harder to kill and more willing to fight than most aliens expected. Estimated time to Vegan system? Kim asked his navigator. 11 hours, sir, replied Officer Sim Yoo-jin. 11 hours to prepare for whatever they would find. Kim hoped they weren't already too late. On the Seoul, Captain Lee Dong-woo was reviewing tactical information with his weapons officer. If they found enemy ships, the Seoul would lead any fighting. What do we know about Zephyrian defenses? Lee asked. They don't have any, replied Tactical Officer Nam Hyun-woo. No military ships, no orbital weapons, no planetary shields. They're completely helpless, Lee shook his head. In a galaxy full of dangerous species, choosing to be defenseless was either very brave or very foolish. Unfortunately, it often led to the same result. On the Busan, Captain Jang Mi-suk worked with her, intelligence officer, to gather any available information about the Vegan system. Long-range sensors show signs of massive energy discharge, reported intelligence officer Baek Min-seo. Someone is using heavy weapons against planetary targets. Military targets? Jang asked. No, ma'am. The energy patterns suggest they're firing at cities, farms, and civilian areas. This looks like deliberate genocide. The word hung in the air like a curse. Genocide. The systematic elimination of an entire species. As the 3 Earth ships raced through hyperspace, their crews prepared for what might be the most important mission of their careers. They were flying toward an unknown enemy who was committing mass murder against defenseless civilians. The Galactic Council would probably condemn Earth's unauthorized military action. Diplomatic protests would be filed. There might be sanctions or trade restrictions, but none of that mattered to the humans racing toward the Vegan system. Someone was killing innocent people, and that was something Earth couldn't ignore. Years ago, when humans first joined the galactic community, other species had warned them about getting involved in alien conflicts. It's not your problem, they said. Stay out of other species' business. But humans had a hard time following that advice. Growing up on a dangerous world had taught them that when someone needed help, you helped them. Even if it was risky. Even if it wasn't your responsibility, because the alternative was to become the kind of person who listened to screams and did nothing, and Earth had never produced that kind of person. 9 hours to destination, Navigator Sim announced. Captain Kim nodded and settled into his command chair for the long journey ahead. Whatever they found in the Vegan system, Earth ships would be ready. They had to be. Because sometimes being ready was the difference between saving lives and counting bodies. And humans were very good at being ready for the worst. The 3 Earth ships moved through hyperspace like silent hunters in the dark. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the swirling colors outside the view screen. His crew worked quietly around him, checking systems and preparing for whatever they would find. How long until we reach the Vegan system? Kim asked. 6 hours, Captain, replied Navigator Sim Yoo-jin. She looked young, but her steady hands on the controls showed years of experience flying through Earth's dangerous space lanes. Kim nodded. 6 hours to prepare for what might be the biggest rescue mission Earth had ever attempted. He pressed the comm button on his chair. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency protocols. We don't know what we're flying into. Throughout the ship, the crew began their preparations. In the medical bay, Dr. Yang Da-Yun checked her supplies again. She had medicine for humans, but aliens might need completely different treatments. She pulled up files from the few alien species Earth had met before. Computer, show me basic Zephyrian biology, she said. The screen displayed what little information Earth had about the aliens who sent the distress call. They were tall and thin with blue-gray skin. They breathed a mix of gases similar to Earth's air. Their blood was green instead of red. Yang frowned as she read the medical notes. Zephyrians were peaceful creatures. They had no military and spent most of their time studying science and art. What kind of enemy would attack such harmless beings? Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Kang Woo-jin worked with his team to modify the cargo bays. If they were rescuing refugees, they would need space for thousands of people. They removed unnecessary equipment and installed basic life support systems. Sir, we can fit about 3,000 Zephyrians in each cargo bay, said his assistant, Tech Officer Ryu Min-ho. But it won't be comfortable. Comfortable doesn't matter if they're dead, Kang replied, tightening a bolt on an air recycler. Make sure every system has backup power. If something goes wrong, these people need to stay alive. On the troop deck, Commander Park Sul-gi briefed her Marines. The soldiers sat in neat rows, their black armor cleaned and weapons checked. Park walked back and forth in front of them, her voice clear and strong. Listen up, Marines. We're going in for a rescue operation. That means protecting civilians, not hunting enemies. Your job is to get innocent people to safety. Sergeant O'Dobbin raised her hand. Ma'am, what if we meet resistance? Park stopped walking. Then we handle it the Earth way. Fast, hard, and final. But remember, every shot you fire might hit a refugee instead of an enemy. Think before you pull the trigger. The Marines nodded. They had all trained for this kind of mission. But training was different from real combat. On Earth, they learned to fight in all kinds of terrible conditions. Burning cities, flooded towns, areas with poisoned air. Their instructors always said the same thing. Earth was trying to kill humans every day, so they had to be tougher than their planet. Meanwhile, in the communications room, Officer Yoon Hana worked on translation programs. The Zephyrian language was musical, with sounds that humans couldn't make perfectly, but the computer could help her understand their words. Captain, she called over the comm. I'm picking up more signals from the Vegan system. The transmissions are getting weaker. Kim felt his stomach tighten. Weaker signals meant fewer people left alive to send them. Can you tell what they're saying? They're begging for help, sir. They say the sky is burning and their children are dying. They don't understand why someone is attacking them. The bridge went quiet. Every officer could hear the pain in Yoon's voice as she translated the alien words. These weren't soldiers dying in battle. These were families being murdered for no reason they could understand. How much longer to the Vegan system? Kim asked again. 5 hours, 30 minutes, Sim replied. It felt like forever. On the Seoul, Captain Lee Dong-woo reviewed tactical information with his weapons officer, Nam Hyun-woo. The Seoul was smaller than the Incheon but carried more firepower. If they found enemy ships, the Seoul would lead the fight. What do we know about their attackers? Lee asked. Nam checked his screens. Not much, sir. Long-range sensors show at least 20 large ships in orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld. They're firing down at the planet's surface. 20 ships against 3, Lee said quietly. I've seen worse odds. Sir, these might not be pirates or raiders. The attack pattern looks too organized. This might be a military operation. Lee thought about that. Pirates attacked for money or supplies. Military operations had bigger goals. What kind of military operation involves killing civilians? Nam didn't have an answer for that question. On the Busan, the smallest of the 3 Earth ships, Captain Jang Mi-suk worked with her intelligence officer, Baek Min-seo. The Busan specialized in electronic warfare and gathering information. Can you break their communications? Chang asked. Working on it, Captain, Beck replied, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. They use a complex encryption system, but I'm finding patterns. Give me another few hours. We don't have a few hours. Then I'll work faster. Beck had grown up in Seoul, where the air was thick with electronic signals from millions of devices. Learning to filter and decode information was like learning to breathe for him. But these alien signals were different. more organized than anything humans used. As the hours passed, the 3 Earth ships continued through hyperspace. The crews checked and rechecked their equipment. Weapons were loaded, medical supplies were organized, and rescue shuttles were prepared for launch. In quiet moments, the soldiers and officers thought about what they might find. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community. Most alien species thought of humans as newcomers, barely civilized creatures from a dangerous world. They called Earth a death world because of its extreme weather, violent geology, and deadly wildlife. But growing up on a death world had taught humans important lessons. They learned that sometimes the universe was cruel for no good reason. They learned that when someone was in trouble, you helped them, even if it was dangerous. And they learned that some threats could only be stopped with violence. The Galactic Council preferred to talk about problems. They formed committees and held debates and passed resolutions. That worked fine when you had time. But the Zephyrians were dying right now and talking wouldn't save them. 1 hour to destination, Sim announced. Captain Kim stood up from his chair. All ships, this is Incheon. Prepare to drop out of hyperspace. We go in ready for anything. The 3 Earth ships began to slow down, preparing to face whatever waited for them in the Vegan system. None of them knew that they were about to encounter an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. An enemy that would test everything Earth's death world had taught them about survival and war. The rescue mission was about to become something much more dangerous. The 3 Earth ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vegan system. What they saw made every human on those ships feel sick to their stomach. The beautiful blue-green world of Zephyr was burning. Huge fires covered entire continents. The planet's 3 moons were dark and lifeless, their surfaces scarred by weapons fire. In orbit around the dying world, 20 massive alien warships moved in perfect formation. "Dear God," whispered Navigator Sim Yoo-jin as she stared at her sensor readings. Captain Kim Tae-ho gripped the arms of his chair. The destruction was worse than anything they had imagined. "Give me a full scan of those ships." "They're huge, sir," replied Tactical Officer Nam Hyun-woo. "Each one is 3 times the size of our largest ship. They're firing some kind of energy weapon down at the planet." On the main screen, they could see the alien fleet methodically destroying everything on Zephyr's surface. Cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in bright flashes of light. The attackers weren't in any hurry. They worked slowly and carefully, making sure nothing survived. "Captain, I'm detecting escape pods," said Sensor Specialist Park Jimin. Her voice shook with anger. "The aliens are shooting them down. They're hunting the survivors like animals." Kim felt his jaw clench. Attacking military targets was one thing. Hunting down refugees was something else entirely. "Communications, open a channel to the alien fleet." "Yes, sir," replied Officer Yoon Hana. She worked quickly at her controls. "Channel open, sir." Kim stood up straight and spoke in his clearest voice. "This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Earth vessel Incheon. We received a distress call from the inhabitants of this system. We demand that you stop all attacks on civilian targets immediately." For a moment, there was only silence. Then a harsh voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect Earth English. "This is Supreme Commander Vextal of the Hegemony 5th Fleet. You will identify yourselves and state your business in this system." Kim looked at his officers. The aliens spoke English, which meant they had been watching Earth for some time. "We are here on a humanitarian mission to provide aid to the people of this planet." The aliens' laugh was cold and cruel. "The creatures on this world are not people. They are parasites that have poisoned this sector of space for too long. We are cleansing them from the galaxy." "Cleansing?" Kim felt his anger rising. "You mean genocide?" "We mean progress," Vextal replied. "Your species is new to the galaxy, human. You do not understand the natural order. Some species deserve to live and grow strong. Others exist only to be removed." Communication Officer Yoon Hana was working at her station, trying to learn more about these attackers. She pulled up what little information Earth had about different alien species. "Captain," she whispered, "I think these are the Hegemony. They're a military alliance from the Outer Rim. They believe in something called species hierarchy." Kim nodded but kept his eyes on the screen. "Supreme Commander Vextal, the people you're attacking are peaceful scientists and artists. They pose no threat to anyone." "That is exactly why they must be destroyed," Vextal answered. "Weak species make the galaxy weak. They waste resources that should belong to the strong. We have cleansed 17 worlds of such parasites. This is the 18th. The bridge fell silent. 17 worlds. Billions of innocent lives wiped out because someone decided they weren't worthy to exist. Sir, Nam reported. 3 more Zephyrian ships just launched from the planet. They're packed with refugees. On the screen, they could see the small alien vessels struggling to escape the planet's gravity. They were clearly not military ships, just civilian transports loaded with families trying to survive. Vextal, those are civilian evacuation ships, Kim said urgently. You must allow them safe passage. There will be no survivors, the hegemony commander replied. That is the point of cleansing. Every parasite must be eliminated. Kim watched in horror as several hegemony ships turned their weapons toward the fleeing refugee vessels. The Zephyrian ships were slow and unarmed. They had no chance of escape. All Earth ships, battle stations, Kim ordered. Prepare to intercept those weapons. On the Sol, Captain Lee Dongwu was already moving his ship toward the refugee vessels. Engineering, give me everything you have. We need to get between those ships and the hegemony guns. Sir, we're 1 ship against 20, his weapons officer warned. Then we better make this one count, Lee replied grimly. The hegemony ships fired their energy weapons at the fleeing refugees. The Sol rushed forward, using its shields to absorb the deadly beams. The human ship shook violently, but it held together. Return fire, Lee ordered. Target their weapon systems. The Sol's guns blazed to life, sending streams of kinetic projectiles toward the nearest hegemony ship. The enemy's shields flared as the human weapons struck home. Humans! Vextal's voice roared over the communication system. You dare interfere with a hegemony operation? Your primitive weapons cannot harm ships of the 5th Fleet. Maybe not, Kim replied. But we're going to try anyway. This is your final warning, Vextal. Stop firing on civilian targets, or we will consider your actions an act of war against humanity. The hegemony commander's laughter filled the bridge. War? You bring 3 tiny ships against an entire fleet and speak of war? Your species has much to learn about the galaxy. Perhaps, Kim said quietly, but your species is about to learn something about humans. Intelligence Officer Bayek Minseo was working frantically at his station on the Busan, trying to break the enemy's communication codes. He had found something disturbing in their transmissions. Captain Zhang, he called to his commanding officer, you need to hear this. I've broken part of their tactical communications. Captain Zhang Mi-suk moved to his station. What did you find? This isn't just a random attack, ma'am. They have a list. A long list of species marked for extermination. The Zephyrians are just one target among hundreds. Zhang felt her blood run cold. How many species are on that list? I count at least 50 different worlds, ma'am. Some of them are species Earth has made contact with. The peaceful traders from Rigel, the scholars from the Centauri system, all marked for cleansing. Send that information to the Incheon immediately, Zhang ordered. Meanwhile, Kim was still trying to communicate with the hegemony commander. Vextal, surely we can find a peaceful solution to this situation. The only solution is for you to leave immediately, the alien replied. Take your ships and go back to your death world. This does not concern you. It concerns us now, Kim said firmly. We will not allow the murder of innocent civilians. Then you will die with them, Vextal snarled. 5th Fleet, new targets. Destroy the human ships first, then continue with the cleansing. The 20 hegemony vessels began to turn toward the 3 Earth ships. Their massive guns swiveled to target the much smaller human vessels. Kim looked around his bridge at his officers. They all knew the odds, 20 against 3, ships 3 times their size with superior weapons and shields. By any reasonable calculation, they were about to die. But as Kim looked at his crew, he saw no fear in their eyes. Only determination. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing it might be a one-way trip. They were here because someone needed help, and Earth had taught them that helping others was worth any risk. Communications.
Open a channel to all hegemony ships, Kim ordered. Channel open.
Sir. Kim's voice was steady and cold as ice. This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 30 seconds to cease all hostile operations against civilian targets. If you fire one more shot at an unarmed refugee ship, we will interpret your actions as a declaration of war against humanity and respond accordingly. 30 seconds? Vextal laughed. Or what, human? You will fire your pathetic weapons at us? No, Kim replied quietly. We will show you why the galaxy calls Earth a death world. The countdown began. 30, 29, 28. On the tactical display, Another group of Zephyrian refugee ships lifted off from the burning planet. They were filled with families, children, elderly civilians who had never hurt anyone in their lives. 20, 15, 10. The hegemony ships powered up their weapons, targeting both the human fleet and the fleeing civilians. 5, 4, 3, 2. Kim looked at his tactical officer. Nam Hyunwoo's hand hovered over the weapons control. 1. A hegemony cruiser fired its main gun at a hospital ship packed with wounded Zephyrian children. 0. All ships, Kim said in a voice like winter wind, show them what a death world teaches its children. The hegemony expected a traditional space battle, ship against ship, honor against honor, with clean lines and proper formations. They had fought dozens of wars this way, always winning because their ships were bigger and their weapons stronger. What they got instead was something their military training had never prepared them for. The Soul moved first. Instead of charging straight at the enemy fleet, Captain Lee Dong-woo ordered his ship toward the asteroid belt at the system's edge. The rocky debris field was dangerous, full of spinning chunks of metal and ice that could crush a ship. "Sir, that's suicide," his navigation officer warned. "Those asteroids could tear us apart." "Only if we fly like them," Lee replied, pointing at the hegemony ships maintaining perfect formation. "We're not them." The Soul plunged into the asteroid field at full speed. The human ship twisted and rolled between the spinning rocks, using moves that no sane pilot would attempt. On Earth, storms could throw aircraft around like toys. Earthquakes could split the ground under moving vehicles. Human pilots learned to fly in conditions that would terrify most aliens. "Target the large asteroids," Lee ordered his weapons officer, Nam Hyun-woo. "Turn them into weapons." Nam understood immediately. The Soul's guns began firing at the biggest chunks of rock and metal, breaking them into smaller pieces and sending them flying toward the hegemony fleet. What had been a debris field became a storm of kinetic projectiles. Supreme Commander Vextal watched in confusion as hundreds of asteroids came streaming toward his ships. "What are they doing? This is not how space combat works." His shields could handle direct weapons fire, but asteroids were different. They were big, heavy, and impossible to shoot down completely. The hegemony ships had to break formation to avoid the worst impacts, scattering their perfect battle line. Meanwhile, the Busan took a completely different approach. Captain Jang Mi-suk ordered her ship down toward the planet Zephyr itself, using the burning world's atmosphere as cover. "Ma'am, the atmosphere is full of smoke and radiation," her pilot warned. "Our sensors will be almost blind down there." "So will theirs," Jang replied. "And we know how to fly blind." The Busan disappeared into Zephyr's thick, poisoned atmosphere. The hegemony ships lost track of it completely. Their sensors, designed for clean space combat, couldn't penetrate the chaos of a dying world sky. "Where do they go?" Vextal demanded. His answer came when the Busan burst out of the atmosphere directly beneath one of his cruisers. The human ship fired everything it had into the enemy's unshielded belly, then vanished back into the atmospheric soup before the other ships could react. The Incheon chose the most direct approach. Instead of running or hiding, Captain Kim Tae-ho aimed his ship straight at the hegemony flagship. "Sir, we're on a collision course," his helmsman reported. "I know," Kim replied calmly. "All hands prepare for ramming speed. Engineering, transfer all crew to the armored sections." The hegemony had never seen anything like it. Ships were expensive and took years to build. No civilized species would intentionally crash one into an enemy vessel. It was wasteful and barbaric. But humans came from a world where sometimes the only way to stop a predator was to hurt it badly enough that it left you alone. They understood that survival was more important than preserving equipment. The Incheon's engines roared to maximum power. The ship accelerated directly at Vextal's command vessel, its reinforced bow aimed at the enemy's bridge. "They're actually going to ram us," the hegemony commander said in disbelief. "Destroy them before they reach us." Energy beams lashed out at the approaching human ship. The Incheon's shields flared and died, but the ship kept coming. Its armor began to glow red-hot under the enemy fire, but still it did not stop. At the last moment, just before impact, escape pods shot out from the Incheon's rear sections. The human crew had evacuated to the armored compartments, leaving the ship on automatic pilot. The Incheon struck the hegemony flagship like a kinetic missile. The smaller human ship crumpled on impact, but its momentum drove it deep into the enemy vessel's hull. Both ships began to spin out of control, locked together in a deadly embrace. "This is madness," Vextal screamed as his bridge shook around him. "No one fights this way." But the humans were just getting started. While the main ships created chaos in space, smaller human craft began boarding operations on damaged hegemony vessels. Commander Park Solji led her Marines through airlocks and blast holes, but they didn't fight the way Galactic soldiers were supposed to fight. Instead of charging into enemy positions, they moved through the ships like ghosts. They cut power lines instead of shooting guards. They disabled life support systems instead of storming command centers. They used the ship's own systems against their crews. Where are they? Panicked hegemony soldiers asked as lights went out and air recyclers stopped working. "Why don't they just attack us directly?" Sergeant O'Dobbin crept through dark corridors with her squad, avoiding confrontation whenever possible. When they did encounter enemy troops, they used stun weapons and sleeping gas instead of bullets. Their goal wasn't to kill every enemy soldier. It was to make the ships useless for combat. "Fear is a better weapon than a gun," O whispered to her Marines as they sealed another group of alien soldiers into their own storage compartment. A dead enemy stops fighting. A scared enemy makes mistakes. On the command ship of a hegemony cruiser, alien officers found their computers displaying messages in perfect hegemony script. "Your life support will fail in 10 minutes unless you surrender immediately." The messages were from intelligence officer Bayek Min Seo, who had hacked into their computer systems from the Busan. He wasn't threatening to kill them. He was promising to let their own ship do it if they didn't give up. "This is impossible," the ship's captain said. "Our security systems are unbreakable." But human hackers had learned their skills on Earth's chaotic networks, where millions of criminal organizations tried to break into systems every day. Breaking alien encryption was actually easier than dealing with Earth's cybercriminals. The psychological warfare was working. Hegemony ships began surrendering not because they were defeated, but because their crews were too terrified to keep fighting. They had never faced an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Supreme Commander Vextal tried to regain control of the battle. "All ships regroup and return to standard formation. These humans fight like pirates and terrorists," but his orders were met with confused responses. Half his fleet was scattered by asteroid impacts. Several ships had no power or life support. Others reported that their computer systems were compromised and their weapons wouldn't fire. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 6 of our cruisers." "Surrender?" Vextal couldn't believe it. "We still outnumber them 10-1.
Yes, sir, but their crews say the humans are inside their ships.
They've taken control of critical systems without firing a shot." On the bridge of the Soul, Captain Lee watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The asteroid storm had broken the enemy formation completely. Several hegemony ships were drifting helplessly with their engines damaged by debris impacts. "Target their weapon systems," Lee ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. We want prisoners to question." This was another lesson from Earth's harsh schools. Information was more valuable than body counts. A defeated enemy could tell you about other threats. A dead enemy told you nothing. The Busan emerged from Zephyr's atmosphere again, this time behind a different hegemony vessel. Captain Zhang had been using the planet's magnetic field to mask her ship's approach, another technique learned from flying through Earth's violent weather. "Hit their communication arrays," she ordered. "Blind them to each other." The human ships worked together without needing constant radio contact. They had trained for this kind of coordinated assault in Earth's war colleges, where the lesson was always the same. Adapt faster than your enemy can react. Within 2 hours, the battle was over. Not because the humans had destroyed the hegemony fleet, but because they had made it impossible for the aliens to fight effectively. Ships without power couldn't fire their guns. Ships without communications couldn't coordinate attacks. Ships with frightened crews couldn't maintain discipline. Supreme Commander Vextal found himself alone on his damaged flagship, surrounded by human boarding parties who had somehow gotten aboard without triggering any alarms. Commander Park stood before him in her battle armor, her weapon lowered but ready. "Surrender your fleet and order all attacks on civilian targets to stop immediately. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare," Vextal said bitterly. Park's voice was cold as space. "We're not civilized. We're from Earth. And on Earth we learned that the only rule in a fight is to win. The hegemony commander looked around at his ruined bridge and his defeated fleet. These humans had taken apart his military force like mechanics dismantling a machine, piece by piece, system by system. For the first time in his military career, Supreme Commander Vextel understood what it meant to be afraid. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within hours, every major space station and colony world knew that 3 human ships had defeated an entire hegemony fleet. The reactions were swift and divided. On the Galactic Council space station, emergency sessions began immediately. Counselor Bexalima, a tall alien with silver skin and 4 arms, stood before the emergency assembly. Her voice echoed through the great chamber where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered. "The humans have committed an act of unlawful military intervention," she declared. "They attacked a sovereign fleet without council authorization. This cannot be allowed to stand." Counselor Veltara from the Rigel system raised one of his tentacles in protest. "The humans saved innocent civilians from genocide. How can we condemn them for preventing mass murder?" "The law is the law," Bexalima replied coldly. "If every species decides to act without council approval, we will have chaos throughout the galaxy." But even as the council debated, more disturbing news arrived. The intelligence data that Officer Bayek Minseo had stolen from the hegemony ships was being analyzed by experts across known space. The list of targeted species was longer and more detailed than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, in the hegemony capital system, the High Command faced their own crisis. Fleet Marshal Zorvak stood before a room full of military leaders, his scaled face dark with anger. "How did 3 primitive ships defeat our 5th fleet?" he demanded. "These humans only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They should not possess such capabilities." General Kexron, commander of the hegemony ground forces, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Sir, the reports indicate they did not fight using standard tactics. They used environmental hazard, psychological warfare, and boarding actions focused on system disruption rather than crew elimination." "Explain that in simple terms," Zorvak growled. "They fought like barbarians, sir. No honor, no rules, no proper formations. They attacked infrastructure instead of warriors." Zorvak's eyes narrowed. "And it worked?" The uncomfortable silence in the room was answer enough. Back in the Vegan system, the 3 Earth ships worked to rescue Zephyrian survivors. Dr. Yang Da-yun had set up emergency medical stations on all 3 vessels, treating the wounded aliens with care and compassion. "Doctor, you need to see this," called medical assistant Kim So-ra. She was examining a young Zephyrian child who had been pulled from the wreckage of an escape pod. Yang moved to the examination table. The child was unconscious but stable. "What is it?" "Look at the genetic scans," So-ra said, pointing to her medical display. "The Zephyrian DNA structure. It's remarkably similar to early human ancestors from about 2 million years ago." Yang stared at the data in shock. "Are you saying these people are related to us?" "Not directly, but the base genetic patterns are almost identical. It's like they evolved from the same original template that humans did, just in a different direction." The implications were staggering. If the Zephyrians were genetic cousins to humanity, then the hegemony wasn't just committing genocide against random aliens. They were destroying people who shared humanity's distant evolutionary heritage. Captain Kim received the medical report while he was interviewing captured hegemony officers. The information made him even more determined to uncover the full scope of the enemy's plans. "Tell me about the cleansing operations," Kim said to a hegemony captain named Dexnal. The alien sat in restraints, his purple skin pale with fear. "I cannot reveal military secrets," Dexnal replied, but his voice shook. "You're not revealing secrets," Kim said calmly. "You're helping us understand why you murdered children. That seems like something worth explaining." Commander Park entered the interrogation room with a data pad. "Captain, we found something in their computer files. You need to see this immediately." Kim looked at the information Park had discovered. It was a detailed timeline of hegemony cleansing operations going back 50 years. 17 worlds had already been purified of what the hegemony called inferior species. "This is the 3rd phase of their expansion plan," Park explained. Phase 1 was consolidating their home systems. Phase 2 was eliminating competitor species with military capabilities. Phase 3 is removing what they call biological waste. Biological waste? Kim felt sick. any species they considered too peaceful, too weak, or too different from their ideal. The Zephyrians were scheduled for elimination because they focus on art and science instead of military strength. Kim turned back to the captured hegemony officer. How many more worlds are on your list? Dexnall remained silent, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Show him the genetic analysis, Kim ordered. Park displayed the medical data on her pad. The Zephyrians share common ancestry with humans. You weren't just committing genocide. You were destroying our distant family. The alien's purple skin went even paler. You are the Deathworlders, he whispered. The warnings in our intelligence files. The species from the world that spawns apex predators. What warnings? Kim demanded. Our scouts reported on your species years ago, Dexnall said, his voice barely audible. They said humans came from a world so dangerous that it created a species capable of surviving anything. The High Command decided to leave you alone until after the cleansing was complete. Kim felt a chill run down his spine. You've been watching us? For decades. We know about your wars, your weapons, your refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The plan was to deal with humanity after all the weak species were eliminated. Park and Kim exchanged glances. The hegemony hadn't just been committing random genocide. They had been systematically removing potential allies before turning their attention to the species they feared most. How many ships does the Grand Armada have? Kim asked. 300 vessels, Dexnall replied. The largest military force in galactic history. Fleet Marshal Zorvak will not allow this defeat to stand unanswered. Across the galaxy, that massive fleet was already moving. Admiral Choi Minho received the warning just as he was preparing to bring reinforcements to the Vegan system. His small force of 12 ships suddenly seemed completely inadequate. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving priority messages from colonies throughout human space. They're reporting strange ships on long-range sensors. Hegemony scouts? Admiral Choi asked. Unknown, sir. But they're positioning themselves near major population centers. The implications were clear. If the hegemony couldn't defeat humanity in direct combat, they might try to hold human civilians hostage. It was a tactic that worked against civilized species who valued all life. On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Marshal Zorvak studied star charts showing the location of every known human colony. His strategy was simple. Surround Earth's expansion zone and force them to choose between saving the Zephyrians or protecting their own people. The humans fight like savages, he told his staff officers, but they still care about their own species. When they see their colonies under threat, they will surrender the Vegan system to save their families. It was a reasonable plan based on how other species had reacted to similar pressure. But Zorvak had made one critical error in his calculations. He assumed that humans would react the same way as other civilized species. He was about to learn that humans had a very different definition of civilization. Back in the Vegan system, Captain Kim stood on the bridge of the damaged Incheon, looking at tactical displays showing the approaching hegemony Grand Armada, 300 ships against Earth's entire fleet of 15 vessels. Sir, Officer Yoon reported, Admiral Choi is requesting orders. The Grand Armada will reach us in 6 hours. Kim thought about the Zephyrian refugees crowded into his cargo bays, families who had lost everything but still trusted humans to protect them, children who looked up at him with eyes full of hope despite the horrors they had witnessed. Send a message to Admiral Choi, Kim ordered. Tell him to bring everything we have. And contact Earth Command. It's time to find out how much the galaxy really knows about Deathworlders. The battle for the Vegan system was about to become something much larger, a test of whether humanity's reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species was earned, or just feared speculation. Both sides were about to get their answer. The Grand Armada arrived at the edge of the Vegan system like a storm cloud blocking out the stars. 300 massive warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the power of a dozen conquered worlds. Fleet Marshal Zorvak stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that this display of overwhelming force would end human resistance quickly. Open communications with the human fleet, he ordered. Admiral Choi. Minho's small force of 15 Earthships looked pitiful compared to the hegemony armada. But when his image appeared on Zorvak's screen, the human admiral showed no fear. I am Fleet Marshal Zorvak of the Hegemony Grand Armada, the alien commander announced. You will surrender immediately and withdraw from this system, or we will destroy every human ship and colony in known space. Admiral Choi was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical display that showed the enemy fleet's positions. Then he smiled coldly. Fleet Marshal Zorvak, I am Admiral Choi Minho of the Earth Defense Fleet. I have a counter-proposal for you. You are not in a position to make proposals. Human. Actually, I am, Choi replied. You see, you made a mistake when you positioned your fleet. Zorvak frowned. His ships were in perfect battle formation, exactly as military doctrine required. What mistake? You put all your ships between my fleet and this system's star, Choi explained. That tells me you've never fought anyone who actually understands stellar physics. On Earth's flagship, Chief Engineer Kang Woo-jin was making final preparations to implement something called the Deathworld Doctrine. It was a battle plan that only humans would have been crazy enough to develop. Engineering teams report ready, sir, Kang announced. All ships have deployed solar collection arrays. What are they doing? Zorvak demanded, watching as strange devices extended from each human vessel. His answer came when the star itself seemed to respond to the human ships. Massive solar flares erupted from the star's surface, triggered by precisely targeted gravitational pulses from Earth's modified engines. Impossible, whispered the Hegemony Fleet's science officer. No species has the technology to trigger stellar events. But humans had grown up on a world orbiting a violent star. Earth's sun regularly threw off radiation storms that could destroy electronics and kill anyone caught in space without protection. Human technology was built to not only survive such events, but to use them as weapons. The solar flares swept across the Hegemony Fleet like a tidal wave of energy. Their shields, designed to stop weapons and debris, were useless against the raw power of a star. Communication systems failed, sensors went blind, and computer networks crashed throughout the alien armada. All ships, implement storm protocols, Admiral Choi ordered his fleet. The human vessels had been preparing for this moment since they entered the system. Their hulls were lined with special materials that absorbed stellar radiation instead of being destroyed by it. Their computers were hardened against electromagnetic interference. Their crews wore protective gear that let them work normally during radiation storms. While the Hegemony Fleet struggled with systems failures, Earth's ships moved through the solar storm like hunters in their natural element. Captain Kim, now commanding one of the undamaged human vessels, led the first attack wave. Target their command ships while they're blind, he ordered. The human fleet struck like lightning in the storm. Their weapons, designed to work in Earth's violent electromagnetic environment, functioned perfectly while hegemony guns remained offline. This is madness, Zorvak shouted as his flagship shook under human weapons fire. Stars cannot be weaponized. Tell that to the people of Earth, Admiral Choi replied over the communication system that still somehow worked on human ships. We've been dealing with solar storms for our entire history. Pilot Officer Lee Jae-sung led a squadron of human fighters through the radiation storm, his small craft dancing between the huge enemy ships. On Earth, he had learned to fly through hurricanes and electrical storms that would ground any sane pilot. This was just another day at the office. Phoenix Squadron, target the enemy sensor arrays, he commanded. Blind them completely. The fighters moved like ghosts through the electromagnetic chaos, their pilots guided by instincts developed on a world where the weather itself tried to kill them. They struck at crucial systems, leaving the massive hegemony ships even more helpless. But the solar flares were just the beginning of Admiral Choi's plan. On the planet Zephyr below, Scholar Prime Velnara was working with Captain Kim's intelligence team to decode ancient archives that had survived the orbital bombardment. What they found changed everything. These records go back thousands of years, Velnara explained to Kim through a secure communication link. They contain the locations of every hegemony target, including species your people haven't met yet. Intelligence Officer Bayek Minseo was simultaneously breaking into captured hegemony computer systems, downloading massive amounts of tactical data. Captain, I'm finding evidence of concentration camps. They're not just killing people quickly. They're studying them first, learning how to eliminate entire species more efficiently. The information painted a picture of systematic genocide on a scale that shocked even the battle-hardened humans. The hegemony wasn't just conquering territory. They were conducting what they called biological optimization, eliminating any species that didn't meet their standards of genetic superiority. How many species have they already eliminated? Kim asked. 43 that we can confirm, Beck replied. Billions of intelligent beings wiped out because the hegemony decided they were inferior. Meanwhile, Marine Sergeant O'Dobbin was leading boarding parties onto disabled hegemony vessels. But instead of fighting their way to the bridges, her teams were doing something unexpected. They were liberating prisoners. "Captain, you need to see this," O reported from inside a hegemony detention ship. "They're not just capturing soldiers. They have civilians from dozens of different species, scientists, artists, children. The prisoners were being held for what hegemony files called biological study. Experiments designed to find the most efficient ways to eliminate each species. It was genocide disguised as research. Get them out of there, Kim ordered. All of them." As the human rescue teams worked to save prisoners, Admiral Choi was implementing the second phase of the Death World doctrine. If the hegemony wanted to use overwhelming numbers, humans would turn those numbers against them. "All ships, execute swarm protocol," Choi commanded. The 15 human vessels suddenly separated into dozens of smaller units. Each ship deployed multiple shuttles, fighters, and automated drones. What had been a small fleet became a swarm of individual targets, impossible to track or target effectively. "Where did they all come from?" Zorvac demanded as his tactical display filled with hundreds of small human craft. "They're using their support vessels as combat units," his tactical officer reported. "Cargo shuttles equipped with weapons, medical ships acting as command centers, even maintenance pods armed with mining lasers." It was another lesson from Earth's violent history. When facing a larger enemy, use everything as a weapon. Every tool could become a gun, every vehicle could become a missile, every person could become a soldier. The human swarm attacked the hegemony fleet from every direction at once. They struck and disappeared, regrouped and struck again, never staying in one place long enough to be effectively targeted. "This is not how civilized warfare is conducted," Zorvac protested. "No," Admiral Choi agreed. "This is how survivors fight, and humanity has been surviving on a death world for 2 million years." Engineer Kang triggered the final phase of the solar assault, causing another massive flare that disabled even more hegemony systems. In the chaos that followed, human boarding teams seized control of key enemy ships not to destroy them, but to turn their own weapons against the fleet. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Sim Yoo-jin, "we have control of 12 enemy vessels. Their crews are surrendering rather than fight us ship to ship." The psychological effect was devastating. Hegemony soldiers, trained to fight other civilized species, found themselves facing humans who seemed to treat the vacuum of space and deadly radiation as minor inconveniences. Within 6 hours, the Grand Armada was in full retreat, not destroyed but broken. Their communications were shattered, their formations scattered, and their confidence completely undermined. "This cannot be," Zorvac said, as he watched his mighty fleet limping away from the Vagan system. "We are the strongest military force in the galaxy." "You were," Admiral Choi replied. "But you never fought anyone from a death world before. Now you know why the rest of the galaxy stays away from Earth." The retreat of the Grand Armada sent shockwaves throughout known space. The hegemony, which had seemed unstoppable for 50 years, had been defeated by a handful of ships from a species most aliens barely knew existed. But Admiral Choi knew this was only the beginning. The evidence they had gathered revealed a genocide that spanned decades and threatened dozens of species. The question now was what humanity would do with that knowledge. The answer would define Earth's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The evidence spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every inhabited system knew the truth about the hegemony's systematic genocide. Officer Yoon Hana had worked tirelessly to translate the captured data into hundreds of different alien languages, ensuring that no species could claim ignorance of the atrocities. The Galactic Council's emergency session was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to view the evidence that Intelligence Officer Baek Min-seo had compiled. Video recordings of concentration camps, scientific data about biological optimization experiments, lists of eliminated species with detailed notes about execution methods. Counselor Bex Lima, who had demanded humanity be censured just days earlier, sat in stunned silence as the evidence played on the chamber's main screen. The systematic nature of the genocide was impossible to deny. "The hegemony must be stopped," declared Counselor Veltara, his tentacles shaking with emotion. "This is not warfare. This is the elimination of intelligent life itself. Agreed, said another representative. But how? Their military might is still enormous even after they're defeated vegan. The council proposes immediate sanctions, Bexalima announced, trying to regain some authority. We will freeze their trade agreements and restrict their access to council space. The chamber erupted in bitter laughter from several representatives. Sanctions, roared Ambassador Kekstar from the warrior clans. They have murdered 43 entire species and you propose paperwork as punishment? Meanwhile on Earth, the response was being decided in emergency sessions at the highest levels of government. President Park So-min sat in the Situation Room with her advisors, watching reports from the front lines. The Galactic Council wants to handle this through diplomatic channels, reported Foreign Minister Lee Hyo-jin. They're asking us to stand down and let them negotiate with the hegemony. Negotiate what? President Park asked sharply. The terms of surrender for the species they haven't murdered yet. Defense Minister Choi Sang-wook spread tactical displays across the table. Our intelligence estimates that the hegemony still has over 200 operational warships. They've withdrawn to their core systems, but they're regrouping for another offensive. Time frame? The president asked. 6 months, maybe less. They'll use that time to rebuild their fleet and recruit more soldiers from their subject worlds. President Park stood and walked to the window overlooking Seoul. The city bustled with normal life. People working, children playing, families living in peace. It was the kind of peace that 43 other species would never experience again. What's our military assessment of a full campaign against the hegemony? She asked. General Kim Tae-sung, the highest-ranking military officer, answered honestly. Difficult but possible. Our technology advantages are significant, but they have greater numbers and established supply lines. Casualties would be heavy. And if we let the council handle it diplomatically, the genocide continues, General Kim said simply. Maybe slower, maybe with different targets, but it continues. President Park nodded. The choice was clear, even if it wasn't easy. Back in the Vegan system, Captain Kim was dealing with a more immediate problem. Thousands of Zephyrian refugees needed homes, but their world was uninhabitable. Scholar Prime Velnara had asked for Earth's help in finding a new planet for her people. We have several colony worlds that could support Zephyrian life, Dr. Yang reported after reviewing the medical data. Their physiology is compatible with modified Earth-type environments. That's not the issue, Captain Kim replied. The issue is protection. Wherever they settle, the hegemony will try to finish what they started. The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Choi contacted Kim from Earth with new orders. The president has made her decision, Choi announced. We're not leaving the Zephyrians or anyone else to face the hegemony alone. Sir? Kim asked. Earth is declaring the existence of something called protected species status. Any civilization threatened by the hegemony can request Earth protection. We'll establish permanent bases in their systems and guarantee their security. It was an unprecedented commitment. Earth was offering to become the galaxy's protector against genocide. The first test came within hours. The peaceful Andorian scientists, whose world was next on the hegemony's cleansing list, sent a desperate plea to Earth. Their planet had no military and no way to defend itself against the coming attack. Deploy the Fifth Fleet to the Andorian system, President Park ordered. Full defensive positions. If the hegemony wants those people, they'll have to go through us. Similar requests flooded in from dozens of worlds. Species that had never heard of Earth a week ago were now begging for human protection. The response strained Earth's military to its limits, but President Park refused to turn anyone away. We can't save everyone, Defense Minister Choi warned during a strategy meeting. Our forces are spread across 20 systems. If the hegemony concentrates their attack on one target, we might not be able to respond in time. Then we don't wait for them to attack, President Park replied. We take the fight to them. The plan that emerged became known as the Terran Doctrine. Instead of waiting for the hegemony to rebuild and regroup, Earth would strike at their infrastructure systematically, not their military bases, their ability to support genocide. Fleet Marshal Zorvak learned about Earth's new strategy when human ships appeared in the hegemony's core systems. But these weren't military attacks. They were something far more dangerous to his regime. Captain Jang Mi-suk of the Busan led the first operation, targeting a hegemony research facility that had been studying captured aliens. Instead of destroying the base, her Marines freed the prisoners and broadcast their testimonies across the galaxy. "The humans are stealing our subjects," Zorvak's science advisor reported. "Every species we've captured for study has been liberated." "Then increase security at the facilities," Zorvak ordered. "Sir, they're not attacking the facilities. They're convincing our own troops to surrender." Half the guards at Research Station 7 joined the humans voluntarily. This was the most devastating aspect of Earth's strategy. Humans didn't just fight the hegemony's military. They exposed the truth about what that military was fighting for. When ordinary hegemony soldiers learned they were guards at extermination camps, many refused to continue serving. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Commander Park led a raid on the hegemony's central archives. Instead of destroying the records, her team copied everything and broadcast it throughout hegemony space. For the first time, the hegemony's own people learned the full scope of their government's crimes. The systematic elimination of 43 species, the concentration camps, the experiments, the plans to continue the genocide indefinitely. "Sir," Zorvak's communications officer reported with shaking voice, "we're receiving surrender requests from 37 of our colony worlds. Their governors refused to support the cleansing operations. The hegemony was collapsing from within. Their military might meant nothing when their own people turned against them. The end came not in a great battle, but in a simple conversation." Zorvak found himself facing Admiral Choi across a negotiation table, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species. "What are your terms?" the defeated fleet marshal asked. "Complete cessation of all cleansing operations," Admiral Choi replied. "Dissolution of concentration camps. War crimes trials for all officers involved in genocide. Reparations to surviving victims. And if we refuse, then we continue until there's nothing left of your military to refuse with." Zorvak looked around the room at the faces of species he had planned to eliminate. They were all under Earth's protection now, all safe from his reach. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why do humans care about species you barely know?" Admiral Choi was quiet for a moment, thinking of Captain Kim's words after the first battle. Then he answered, "Because we know what it's like to be alone in the dark. Earth taught us that sometimes the universe is cruel for no good reason. But it also taught us that when someone screams for help, you answer, even if you don't know them, even if it's dangerous, because the alternative is to become the kind of species that listens to screams and does nothing." He leaned forward, his voice growing cold, and we've seen what that kind of species does to the galaxy. In the months that followed, Earth's role in galactic affairs transformed completely. The Galactic Council officially recognized the Protected Species Program, though they complained that humans were too aggressive in their methods. "You fight like barbarians," Councillor Bexalima said during one heated session. "Yes," Admiral Choi agreed. "And because we fight like barbarians, 43 species that should be extinct are still alive. Because we respond to distress calls with weapons instead of committees. Children who should be dead are playing in safe homes. If that makes us barbarians, then the galaxy needs more barbarians." The Protected Species Program grew to include over 100 worlds. Earth's fleets patrolled vast regions of space not as conquerors but as guardians. Human bases became symbols of safety for species that had nowhere else to turn. On the rebuilt world of New Zephyr, Scholar Prime Velnara stood with Captain Kim, watching Zephyrian children play in gardens that would never have existed without human intervention. "Your people saved us," she said. "But more than that, you showed the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for." "We showed the galaxy what it looks like when someone actually fights," Kim replied. "The universe has plenty of civilizations that debate ethics while children die. It needed at least one that would arrive with weapons ready and ask questions later." Years later, when diplomats asked why Earth had committed so much to protecting strangers, the answer was always the same. It wasn't about politics or resources or strategic advantage. It was about the simple truth that Earth's harsh world had taught humanity. When you hear someone screaming in the dark, you run toward the sound, not away from it. Even if you don't know who's screaming. Even if you're outnumbered. Even if it might cost you everything. Because that's what it means to be human. And sometimes the galaxy needs reminding of what humanity actually stands for. The hegemony had learned what it meant to face Earth's Deathworlders. But the real lesson was simpler and more profound. They had learned what it meant to face people who would rather die fighting than live, knowing they could have helped and chose not to. In the end, that was humanity's greatest weapon. Not their technology or their tactics or their willingness to use the environment itself as a battlefield. It was their absolute refusal to let evil succeed just because fighting it was hard.